Hello and welcome to Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where every week I discuss the future of this region, blessed humongously with hydrocarbon resources. Every week we give some time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and her people. Now this episode is no different as we're here once again to focus on measures that will take this region to a more promising future. Now, be reminded, the program is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC, SPDC, Total Energies Achip joint venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered here in Port Harcourt. I'm Adidayo Ilushakin. Thanks for joining us. Our topic for this episode is Path to Zero, Shell's commitment to safety. Now, safety and environmental protection are critical issues, especially in regions where the impact of industrial activities can be profound. Shell has long been a key player in the energy sector, and their Goal Zero initiative represents a bold commitment to achieving zero harm to people and the environment. The ambitious goal is not just about compliance, but about fostering a culture where safety and environmental care are integral to every decision and action. Now, to help us delve deeper into this commitment, we have a special guest joining us today. My guest brings a wealth of experience and insight into the strategies and practices that drive Shell's safety and environmental efforts. We will explore how Shell is leveraging technology, innovation, and community engagement to move towards their Goal Zero ambition. In this episode, we'll discuss the key strategies Shell has implemented to enhance safety and the role of technological advancement in achieving environmental excellence and the importance of fostering a safety culture within the organization. So whether you are interested in corporate sustainability, environmental protection, or simply want to learn more about how one of the world's leading energy companies is making a difference, this episode is for you. Let's dive in and learn some more about Shell's path to achieving Goal Zero. Again, today's topic on Canvas is Path to Zero, Shell's commitment to safety. And my guest is Elozino Olaniyan. Elozino Olaniyan is the General Manager, Safety and Environment for Shell Companies in Nigeria. Her career in the Nigerian oil and gas industry spans 3 decades of technical and leadership roles in the field of development, business planning, domestic gas planning, commercial and safety and environment. She is a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. She is also a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers, and the Nigerian Institute of Safety Engineers. Elozino, or Elo, as she likes to be called. Hi, welcome to Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It was tough getting you here, but eventually we landed it. It's great. I know you're very busy.
Yeah, safety is a very, very, very hectic thing to be keeping an eye on. So it takes me quite to a lot of places. But like you say, we've landed today, so it's good to have a conversation.
I'm sure we'll talk about the culture of it, safety and all of that, as regards, Shell's activities in company and externally. But I sense that you don't just talk safety, you live safety. And might I mention, I observed that, just before we started recording this episode of the podcast, while we're trying to get you seated and some other things, you observed some safety concern with the wiring and the cables and all of that. Are you like that all the time?
Well, you used the word in the introduction, right? You said culture. And culture is who we are. Culture is not just a label that we put on our heads. It's who we are. It's what we do on a daily basis. So indeed, what I preach in Shell, what I preach in industry, it's in my DNA. And so everywhere I go, I will be looking out for safe practices. And I have intervened in people working on the streets, people working in private organizations. I just intervene and ask them, this task that you're doing, what do you see as the risks of this? Could you fall off that ladder? And you find that when you engage them using what we learn in Shell, they turn around and say, Madam, thank you so much. I've never thought of it that way. the next time I'm doing this activity, I would do it differently. So yes, the answer is yes. Everywhere I go, I take safety with me.
All right, we'll come to that some more in detail, and especially how to turn it into a culture, turning safety into a culture. But let's start on this note, or continue rather. Can you please explain what Shell's Goal Zero is exactly, and why is it so important to the company?
Thank you for that. Most times when we want to start up a cultural change, you need to keep it simple, right? You need to keep it in a way that everybody understands. And when I mean everybody, from the managing director or the VP at the top to the last man on the line who's turning the valve, screwing those nuts. And for us, Goal Zero is that simple standard for safety for us in Shell. What does it mean? It means that we understand that the human being is the most important part of our business. And so we want to make sure that at the end of every year, we have lost no human being. And also we have not injured any human being, because you could say somebody could survive, but if you lose an arm or you lose a leg, then we haven't achieved our goal. So that's what Goal Zero stands for. It means zero harm, zero leaks, because it's not just our people, it's also our systems, our assets. So we want to ensure that the oil remains in the pipeline, no leaks. So with that in mind, when you go deeper, there are several other rules that are associated with that. But the singular thing, if you're going to put it on a T-shirt for everybody to wear, will be Goal Zero. And the idea is everybody that comes to work in Shell operations in Nigeria should go home safely.
Now, you mentioned just now that it's about human beings. What I learned in elementary business studies and other such courses in maybe from secondary school or thereabouts is businesses are set up primarily to make money, to return a profit. But are you saying that for Shell, it's not that? It's primarily first and foremost about people. Where is the profit aspect in all of this then?
So that's a very intriguing question, right? Because indeed, businesses are set up for money. But who makes the money for the business? It's a question to you.
Oh, people, I suppose.
Excellent. So if I have, let's look at your studio here, beautiful studio you have here, by the way. So you have your cameras, you have your props, but you do not have people. You don't have people that are trained to use the machine. There will be no profit coming in. So at the end of the day, any company that focuses on its people, it's already focusing on the bottom line, which is profit. We also talk about worker welfare, and we probably will get a little more into that as we talk in this conversation. Worker welfare for us is top agenda, because what that means is that if you pay attention to the people working for you, they in turn will pay attention to your work, and then it comes to profit. So profit is important, yes, but you cannot have profit without the people. So take care of the people, and the profit will come at the end of it.
Now, you mentioned that whenever you want to accomplish something, I'm paraphrasing now, first thing you have to do is keep it simple. So as far as strategies go, I suspect that that's one of it that Shell has employed. Keep the goal simple, and hence Goal Zero. Now, as far as strategies go, what other strategies has Shell or is Shell implementing as it attains or strives for Goal Zero?
So there are several. I mentioned already that Goal Zero is a simple, high-level objective, but underneath it, there are lots of strategies that are, and I'll mention a few. One will be operational safety initiatives, and we'll call them the safe systems of work. We work in a very high-risk environment. We're talking about high pressure. We're talking about electrical systems. We're talking about rotating equipment. And part of what we do in our safe systems of work is ensure that we have simple processes and systems to ensure that every task that we do is clear. Everybody coming to work in our operations is following the same system to get work done. So that's one. The second strategy will be around behavioral safety. Safety is a mind thing, right? You can have stickers all over the place, but except the man or woman doing the task realizes that safety is in their hands, we cannot succeed. So behavioral safety is around empowering people to take safety as their own initiative, empowering people to speak up. So even if you see a GM or your MD doing something unsafe, you should be able to respectfully say, sir, ma'am, the process says this is how we do things, right? And they understand it's for the safety of everybody. Behavioral safety also talks about leaders. And I pause there because as leaders, and when I say leaders, I'm sure if I use an analogy of parents, it's easier to understand. How do we receive bad news, right? If your child, for example, fails a paper, are they able to come home and say to dad or mom, this is what has happened, knowing that they are not going to get killed, but knowing that you will take them, find out what has gone wrong, and help them to improve? And that is an analogy for what we do in behavioral safety for leaders. What we have seen, and this is out of years of research, that leaders don't accept bad news, right? Something is wrong in the facility. People are afraid to tell you because they know that if you hear, somebody's going to get sacked, somebody's going to get punished. So everybody does what? Everybody's quiet. And that festers until one day, boom, something really goes wrong. So what we're saying, part of our behavioral safety strategy, is that leaders have to learn, and it's a training we actually give our leaders. How do you receive bad news? How do you dig into bad news? And that's where you get into our investigate and learn. We have a very robust investigation process in Shell. And we always, and we find out that when we're doing investigations, especially with contractors, we have to bring them up to speed to say, hey, this is not around looking for who is to blame. This is not around looking for who to sack. No, this is about understanding what went wrong in the system. How can we fix it to ensure that tomorrow, Mr. A, Mr. B, maybe 10 years after we've all gone, somebody else doing this task is able to do it safely. Yeah? So that's part of what we do as part of the whole behavioral safety. It's really around ensuring that people know what to do. It's ensuring that leaders know how to help to ensure that the whole system is safe. In the whole strategies, I've mentioned the life-saving rules. Maybe I haven't, but that's also something that we deploy. Life-saving rules is a set of rules that, as it says, helps us save lives. But it's across a wide range of things. It's around line of safety, how you put yourself in, line of fire, how you put yourself in line of fire for moving objects. It talks about how do you walk in enclosed spaces. Driving rules, we know in Nigeria, Shell has been at the forefront of using the seatbelt way before road safety brought it in. And in those days, when you're using your seatbelt, they say you're a Shell person. But we see that now. We talk about electrical safety. It's a whole set of rules that we believe captures the way we do work. I think those would be the ones. Oh, then assurance. Okay. As Shell, that's something we pride ourselves to do. Sometimes we say we assure ourselves to death, but it's to avoid death. So what is assurance? We do a lot of self-assurance and also bring in third parties and independent people to assure for us. And what does assurance mean? We do drills, regular drills. So we say our building is safe. We say we have systems that are working, evacuation systems that are working. We test that by ourselves from time to time, yeah? So are these things working? We do audits. We open ourselves to international auditors to come in and say, these are the systems that we work. This is our management system. Come and check it. And by our assurance system, it helps us to be more robust. It helps us to identify where gaps are. And it helps us to ensure that we close those gaps in a systematic manner so that people that come into the systems, it's an improvement journey, right? We're not there yet. We know we are not there yet. We want to learn. And that's the reason why we put those assurance systems in place. So in a nutshell, those are a few of the systems we have just to ensure that people are safe when we go out to work. We are here in the city. We have access to a lot of things. There are people who are working by chopper an hour out, by boat 5 hours out. We do not want to get in a situation where we are doing emergency flights to get people out. So our preference is that work is done safely and there's no emergency.
Now, you mentioned a while ago that in spite of having all these systems and structures in place, no matter how many stickers you have put up or signs, it still comes down to people. But people are complex, and sometimes people do the wrong things, maybe unknowingly, sometimes knowingly. But you also described how that when things do go wrong, it's not about who's responsible, looking for who to fire. But when things do go wrong, more often than not, someone is responsible for it. So what's wrong with identifying who's responsible and possibly even some consequence for that?
So we are not against consequent management. Let me put that clearly. However, we are against hiding systematic errors under people. So again, I like to work with analogies. You know that your car light has been blinking. The engine light, for example, has been blinking. And then your driver has been telling you, Oga, we need to service this car or whatever. Maybe it's your brake light or whatever. And then your car breaks down at 8 p.m. in the night, maybe with your children in the car. Now, are you going to fire your driver? He was the one driving the car. Are you going to fire your driver? That might be a natural thing for many people to do. But no, what we're saying in Shell, while the person was involved in that incident, there are systematic issues. If you do a proper investigation, you can go all the way back. And what we find is that in that particular scenario is that as a company, you have enabled an error-enforcing condition. Your driver has warned you, your light is flashing, you've done nothing about it. The driver will say, well, if Oga says it's okay, it's okay. Mm-hmm. And at the end, there's an incident. So what we're saying in that situation, if you do a proper investigation, you will find out that the driver is not wrong. The driver has actually done his part. And in there, we take actions. Actions like ensure that once an alarm light goes on, the car should go in for servicing. And we hard code that into our system so that nobody fails to do that. There may be an instance where you actually find out that maybe the driver took something out of the car or something and is wrong. And in such a situation, the driver would get consequence managed. But the point of our investigation and learn is to ensure that we don't hide things under the carpet. There are things that we do as companies, knowingly or unknowingly, that could lead to incidents. And if you keep on firing people, the incident will keep on occurring, right? Mm. Because you put a new person there, the system is wrong. Eventually, the incident happens again. So the purpose of our investigate and learn is not to go after people, because that's the easiest thing to do, but to understand what went wrong and put in place lifelong measures to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Once again, identifying the place of people in all of this, fostering a culture of safety is quite critical, such that safety becomes not just second nature, maybe even first nature for people. It's very important. How does Shell go about doing that? How does Shell foster a culture of safety in its staff? And very important, as you also identified a while ago, even contractors as well.
Contractors. It's influencing, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you can put all the biggest signboards, right? The person doesn't believe that this is the right thing to do, it won't happen. So it's really around influencing. You rightly said contractors are a big part of what we do. We operate here with our activities are about 80% of contractors. Some of them come in and do something for us for a month and they go out. Some of them are for us for years. How do you ensure that the contractor who is with you for 2 months and the contractor who has been with you for 10 years are operating under the same standard, right? Mm-hmm. Goal zero. And that's where training comes in. So in Shell, we do a lot of HSE. HSE is Health, Safety and Environment, competency training to ensure that anybody working with us understands, the basic framework of what we do. So for example, for people working in some of our facilities in Port Harcourt, we do what they call HSE passports, right? Okay. HSE passport is, we started this recently and it's catching on because it does make sense. Basically, what it is that you're going to get a passport, and all of the critical areas that we want you as a contractor to know, right? We put you in a classroom training and take you through it. And we stamp for all of the topics that you've done it, right? So let's say a painter is coming to paint in our offices that is 3 stories up. We want you to know that if you're climbing on a scaffolding, there are some expectations, and it will be part of the passport training. So when you come back to work on our facility another day, before you can work, we ask you for your passport. So it's just like immigration control. We want to see your passport. We want to see all the trainings you've had. And if you're good to go, if not, we send you back for training. That's one way. I'm not saying those are all the ways, but that's one way we do it. Training. For our folks working in the field, we keep doing that, training. We have engagements with our contractors at various levels. We have one that we have annually, which is more like a conference. We call that the Contractor CEOs Conference. And this is big because we have all the CEOs of our contractors and Shell leaders coming together in a room to discuss safety. And this for me is very important, right? Because safety is the tone from the top. You know, in Nigeria, we say, do as I do and not as I say. We as leaders need to show that we are working safe. And so that's what that conference does. We bring leaders into the room, we discuss topical issues, and we are hoping that they all go back into their organizations and take that back. Last year, we spent a lot of time talking around this, my whole definition of behavioral safety and psychological safety, because it was new for us as people. Somebody does something wrong, fire him. Why are we speaking all this big English of investigation and all of that? But now people are beginning to understand that with behavioral safety, people tell you more. You begin to know more around what is wrong in your system. And when you know what is wrong in your system, then you can fix it. Because many wrong things is what leads to catastrophic failure. So we do that. We also do use family units. So family units are like small cells, and they are based around work operations, right? So rather than, okay, we're having a big conference, GM is coming to talk to us about safety, no. We have smaller units like 10 people, 12 people on work units, and they meet regularly, like cell fellowships, if you would. And they meet regularly. And basically what they will talk about is their welfare, what they see around, things that can help, things that they need help with, and things that can help. And they will have a safety family unit leader who then cascades some of their feedback and observation up the line. And we collate those as well. And I think one more that I'd like to add is what we call unsafe acts, unsafe conditions. So like you mentioned, I came in and I mentioned the trip hazards. That is an unsafe act. In Shell, we would actually document it and keep it in a database.
Yeah, that's documented, by the way.
Document and keep it in a database, because tomorrow, if somebody comes into this facility, trips, falls, break their hands from that kind of unsafe condition, the question then would be, when it was identified, what did we do about it? So the unsafe act, unsafe conditions is actually a learning tool. When people are free to raise it. So as you walk around doing your business, anything you see around that's unsafe, raise a card, right? And put it in the system, be clear on where you saw it. And then somebody will act on it. We'll go in there, investigate, why is this there? Was it forgotten there? And then we can fix it. That way, it helps to keep the whole organization safe.
Being a leading player in the oil and gas industry globally, there's no doubt that Shell employs a lot of technology and must be at the forefront of innovation as well, as far as technology is concerned. But when it comes to safety, what technological innovations, for example, is Shell employing to engender cultural safety in the organization?
So there are several that I can share. And to your previous questions, and that would be my first use of technology. So another way that we foster safety is by management visits. So we encourage managers to leave the comfort of their lovely offices and their ACID offices to go into the field, right, and visit people and inspect activities that are being done. However, during COVID, because we had limitations of people. We're keeping people in their cycles. So if we know that you're all COVID-free, stay there. We won't bring anybody into that. But we still needed leaders to go into the field. And so we started to use virtual reality, augmented reality. So we had systems where with a camera, you can go in and actually do your visit. And we use that more these days. So I don't have to be everywhere. I can be in one field today, and instead of taking a chopper and going somewhere tomorrow, I can use via the augmented reality to visit the field. We've also been able to use robotics. And an example that I will give where we use that is in tank cleaning. So I don't know if you've seen any of those huge tanks that you will see at any of our terminals. Those are the typical pictures you will see. Those tanks are huge. I've entered them before, and I doff my hat to the boys and girls that are working there on a day-to-day basis. We need to clean those tanks on a regular basis. And traditionally, you need to send a human being in there. It's a dark tank. It's a smelly tank because hydrocarbons have been in there. But we have moved away from sending human beings there. We have records in industry of people either suffocating or a flash fire or something, and they're unable to get out because the hole to come out is like this small. It's a manhole to get out. So if there's an incident, to get out is difficult. But we've progressed to putting robotics in there. So we have robots that are going in now to clean the tanks, minimizing human in there. We have ROVs, remote operated vehicles, which we use for underwater in our shallow water and deep water organizations. You can't dive that deep. It's unsafe to send people to dive that deep to do activities. And so we use ROVs. We have the use of forward-looking infrared cameras, which we use in our facilities to identify or to see where flares are, so we can minimize that. We have leak detection on our pipelines. So in the past, you rely on eyesight or somebody to tell you there's a leak there. And in the process of mobilizing, the time has gone. But we now have leak detection on some of the pipelines that gives you instant messaging when there's a leak or there's a reduction in pressure in any of those. So there are quite a range of technologies being deployed now to keep systems safe. Remember what I said initially? Goal zero, people, no leaks. So there are quite a lot of technologies that are being deployed in that respect.
Now, since this is a goal, there must be a means of measuring progress towards goal zero. How does Shell measure progress? What are the most important metrics that's employed?
So I particularly like that question because in Shell we say we are a learning organization. And people will usually wonder, what does it mean to be a learning organization? As a learning organization, you need data. There's a popular saying that you cannot improve what you don't measure. So first of all, you have to measure. You have to accept that you are not where you want to be. Then you need to set goals. So to address your question, there will be the leading and there will be lagging indicators. What you see at the end of the day are the lagging indicators. There's a fatality. I mentioned already the cables and the trip hazard. Those are all leading indicators, and that's why we do the UAUCs. If you don't fix them now, it could lead to a more serious event in the future. So by way of matrices, we have the lagging indicators, which is what you will see on our bill, on our dashboard, but we focus more on the leading, right? Because that is where you can begin to make changes. That's when you can influence. So typical things you'll see on the lagging be fatalities, which is 0. Process safety incidents, we track those as well. Our emissions, we have those limit that is set. Those are the high-level kind of things that we see on our dashboard. But at the back end of that, there's a whole long list of the things that that we measure. How many times somebody cuts his hand? We call them first aid cases. So you will not see that on the MD's dashboard, right? But several times people are cutting their hands. Maybe they are walking without gloves, right? You injure your hand, first aid case. Oh, no problem. Just put plaster and go back to work. We measure that. We calculate that. We don't want to see that. How many times do we see people walking around without their helmets? How many times do we see people turning up without their correct PPE, right? How many times do we see when we track our facility integrity, for example, there are standards and processes of how we maintain them, right? Preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance. How are we doing with those matrices? Are we, like the example I gave about the car, when the light goes on, what do we do? Do we stop and check it or do we continue? Those are all of the things that we check at the back end. And over time, we have learned to identify those ones that trip us up, and we pay a lot of attention to them. So in that manner, when you see a green dashboard, while it might be looking green, there's a lot going on in the background, a lot of matrices being benchmarked, a lot of matrices being checked and rechecked, a lot of discussion going on with the asset leaders to ensure that all of those leading indicators are properly managed so that we don't end up as a red on our lagging indicators.
It is Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC. On this episode, we are discussing Path to Zero, Shell's commitment to safety. My guest, of course, is Elo. We'll return shortly after this very quick break. Do please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Hello, welcome back. It is Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC. I'm Dio. And on this episode of the podcast, we're discussing Goal or Path to Zero, Shell's commitment to safety. My guest, of course, knows all about Shell's commitment to safety. As a matter of fact, you could say that she's in the forefront of driving and achieving that commitment. My guest is General Manager for Health and Safety, Shell Companies in Nigeria, Elozino Olania. Elo, you're welcome again.
Thank you.
You mentioned yourself in the first half of this conversation the crucialness or how important leadership is to Shell's commitment to safety. Speaking of which, what role, you spoke to it somewhat earlier, but if you could delve into it in some more detail, what role does leadership play in driving the Goal Zero initiative, and how do leaders in Shell support this goal?
I would say they play a very important role. Well, speaking for myself, that's the primary role that I have. But for every other leader in Shell, it's top and center on their performance management, right? How they embrace the safety culture and how that is embedded in their organization. For us in Shell, there are several ways. We say that it's from the tone from the top. So even in our business planning, you will see elements of safety and environment in there. I've already mentioned around fatalities. And when we talk about the environment, we are very focused on how we are emitting into the environment, lots of initiatives to reduce emissions. We go into the field. Every leader is mandated. We have a fixed target of the different fields that you should visit. Because what we have found is that when you go into the field, you hear stuff, you see stuff that you can help to make the system more integral and safe. As leaders, I talked about our behavioral safety. We are coached on how to receive bad news. We are coached on how to manage our staff that need to give us bad news. Because the last thing you want as a leader is to be in an ivory tower where nobody tells you the stuff that you need to know. Every incident that happens has a history of things that nearly didn't happen. And if nobody's talking about them, then there is a problem. So we also ensure that we're not having a conversation with ourselves. And that's why we also pull in the contractor CEOs as well. So we're all leaders in this. We have the engagements with the contractor CEOs at that level to have similar conversations, ensure that we're carrying the same kind of targets. Because once anybody comes to work on our facility, it's no longer us and them. When it comes to human life, it's just us. So everybody must be speaking the same language in terms of safety. And those are the ways that we keep the culture going as leadership.
Now, shore facilities and installations exist in communities. And if we're going to, or Shell is going to ensure that culture of safety, community must be involved. So how does Shell engage the community to ensure Goal Zero is achieved and safety standards are upheld?
So what we're doing today is one of those ways, right? Preaching the gospel of safety is one way that we need every tool available. For our facilities in the communities, they do a lot to engage. It's really around people building stores on top of gas pipelines, people cutting through barriers when you've said this is a barrier, no entry zone, people going through there. People understanding that if you see something, especially around leaks, it needs to be urgently attended to. And so we have sea watchers, that as we call them, which are people that are part of the community. These are people that help us to keep an eye on our assets. They understand the impact. If anything goes wrong, then they tell us, and then we move in instantly to support the community. We also do a lot of training as well on safety, on the whole Goal Zero initiative. Many of them work in our facilities because we cannot do this by ourselves. So once they come into work, they are also part of the training that we give. They are also part of the family units that I mentioned earlier on as well. So by this, we try to ensure that the community is also in tandem with us in our journey to Goal Zero. And it's not just us speaking to ourselves, but people walking around us. They do understand what Shell means by Goal Zero, and they help us to abide by that standard.
Right of way has been a consistent conversation as far as Shell's facilities, pipelines especially, are concerned. To what extent those community, in your experience, have come to understand the importance of have an appreciation for the right of way of installations in the oil and gas industry, and how is the community responding to that these days?
So I would like to take us out of the oil and gas, right? And I pose it as a people problem. I'm sure I don't know if you've lived in Lagos, but you've seen those railroads, right? Where people sell on top of the railroads. I mean, that is a right of way. And when they hear the train coming, then they remove their wares from the road and allow the train to pass. And as the train passes, they go back right there. There has been incidents where people have been killed because they cannot move their wares as quickly as the train is coming. this is an endemic challenge we have in Nigeria, not just oil and gas. People will always want to push the boundaries of their own operating envelopes. And it's a challenge that we have. The challenge for us in the oil and gas is that people don't see the immediate, they don't see the immediate problem. This pipeline has been there since, and nothing has happened. So I can be close to it. You see people under high tension, building houses under high tension cables. Nothing has happened. There's nobody enforcing it. But the thing about safety is that we plan for the worst case. In the event that something happens to that pipeline, we do not want anybody to be harmed. And that is the reason why we ask that the right of way is preserved and people are not encroaching into that area. And it could be right of way in anything. I talked about the rail system, I talked about electricity. The same goes with us in the oil and gas. The right of way, people should be encouraged, and we'll keep on preaching, we'll keep on influencing, that they understand that it's their own lives at risk when they encroach into rights of ways.
Now, still along these lines, what are the biggest challenges that Shell is facing with its Goal Zero plan, and how is Shell addressing these challenges?
So I think it will be same as what I've just spoken. So community is one, because for us to succeed in Goal Zero, we all have to be singing of the same song sheet. And we know that life is evolving, right? So while we in Shell are trying very hard to keep up with life, or in some instances ahead of technology so that we can remain relevant, we are having to pull the community, a couple of steps behind us. So community is one of the challenges, but we do it. I think our community relations folks do a fantastic job in engaging the communities to bring them up to speed. Another challenge that we probably would, if you want to call it a challenge, we are operating on behalf of a joint venture. And so whatever it is that we do, we also need to ensure that our joint venture partners are also up to speed. So in terms of reporting, in terms of influencing, there are some times that because we are in some instances ahead in technology, we need to influence them to say we need to do this now, even when regulations in Nigeria is not hasn't said to do it, and they say, hey, people, you are doing over syllabus. You understand? But Shell, we have seen, because we have a global operation, that a lot of these global best practices are good for us. So even in a country where we do not have regulations that meet such things, we bring those best practices into the country, and that creates a challenge. You could call it a good challenge, right? But it's still a challenge because sometimes it needs additional money to achieve. Sometimes it needs additional people to achieve. And that's why I will always go back to influencing, right? Because it's my job to be able to demonstrate to my partners, whether it's the community, whether it's regulators, whether it's my JV parties, that this thing that I want to do, this new project that I want to do, is for the benefit of individuals, is to keep the system safe, and is to ensure that we have no incidents at the end of the year. So I think in terms of collaboration, it's working well so far. Industry, we do have an industry collaboration forum where we also bring all these best practices in. And sometimes when we see that, 2-3 companies are actually doing this already, then it helps, right? It helps with the advocacy with the government, because then you can say, it's not just me. This person and this person, they've brought it. They've done it in Brazil. They've done it in the US. They've done it in Indonesia. It has worked. So we can bring it in here. So for me, I think if I was just going to articulate the challenges, it'll be one, dealing with the whole concept that people are the real holder of safety, and ensuring that you are educating and re-educating them, because technology advances, right? What you knew yesterday cannot get you through today. So that whole re-education of people is one. Two would be our partners, right? Ensuring that, again, that whole cycle of influencing, education, best practices is brought into our operations. And then the third one is around regulators. How do we influence? How do we advocate that policies that are being put in place are robust enough to keep our systems safe? So that's where I'd like to leave it. It's mostly a challenge of bringing what we know as Shell, bringing that global knowledge into a local setting. It poses a challenge for industry, it poses a challenge for contractors, it poses a challenge for community, but we see it as a good thing, and so we continue with it. We continue with the gospel preaching, we continue with the advocacy.
I don't know how comfortable you are blowing your own trumpet, but what are some of can you discuss some milestones recorded, especially recently, in Shell's Goal Zero ambitions?
So I'll be I'll put a caveat on the table, because one of the things as a safety professional that we know is that safety is a very fragile achievement, right? We can say we've had a very wonderful year and the next minute something happens. But what I can say is that we have put in a lot of controls in place. For example, learnings from incidents where we were recording across Shell numerous fatalities in high numbers over years. We've seen that the life-saving rules, which we implemented and which the IOGP, which is International Oil and Gas Producers, now a standardized life-saving rule, adopting that has led to a significant reduction of fatalities. So unlike before, before life-saving rule was implemented, where we were talking in tens, we're now talking single digit. And by God's grace, we are hoping to close 2024 without any fatality in Shell Nigeria. That will be the collective effort of everybody's focus on Goal Zero. We've also seen people, the system, also gathering around the strength of behavioral safety. And for me, that is an achievement, something that we can blow our trumpet on, because we have created, or we are trying to create, an environment, and we see the progress where anybody. So I have been on a facility, for example, where we had a fire. It wasn't a fire drill. The alarm actually went off in the middle of the night. This was 1 a.m. And I came out of my room, and because I wasn't familiar, I had done the drill, right? It was unfamiliar. They had explained to me before, but I was headed to the wrong direction to my mustering point. But somebody saw me and said, Madam GM, you're supposed to be going that way, right? And that, for me, is psychological safety. We should be able to intervene when we see people it doesn't matter the level of the person. As long as you are quoting off what Shell has said is a standard, we will do this, we will do this, we will do that, then I should be able to say, Ogadayo, this process that you're following doesn't comply with this. This is how we should do this. So we see a lot of successes in our drive for psychological safety. We see a lot of successes with our engagement with our contractors. We actually track how they do. So the same metrics that we have, we track it with them. And we see several of our contractors operating the year without any major fatalities, without any major injuries, and fatalities, which for me is a great achievement. So while I don't want to put numbers, and of course I can talk about our emissions target as well, where we have said over time we will reduce emissions. And this year we have done a significant amount, putting abatement projects in place to ensure that volumes that were previously being flared are now going into the pipeline, into domestic gas or LNG. So my achievement and my pat on my back is that I see the measures that we've put in place working. I see that our eyes are all on goal zero, that things are moving further and further down the line. And at the end of the year, when we achieve real goal zero, we will celebrate.
All right. And speaking of at the end of the year, or more precisely now, looking forward, what are Shell's plans for improving safety and environmental performance?
So it'll be more of the same, right? We have great processes and systems in place, which we will continue. I've already mentioned that we are a global organization, and so we learn from that. There are global best practices. We are a member of the IOGP, and from time to time, we see that our processes and controls that we have locally need to be improved, and we will improve as we go along. I've mentioned proudly that we are a learning organization. We are proud to say this system is too old. It's time to move on to a new system. And we will do that from time to time as we see that our systems are no longer robust enough to control and keep people safe. So in terms of where we are moving forward, goal zero remains goal zero. However, there may be additional elements we'll add to the goal zero objective. Emissions is becoming a very strong part of the work that we do as an organization. So ensuring that our eyes remain on reducing our emissions and achieving net zero for us in Shell is very important. Ensuring that people are trained to do the job that we've asked them to do is very, very important. Ensuring that people have the right tools to do the job that we've asked them to do. So we don't want people using a knife to open a valve, open a screw, because there's no screwdriver available. And they've asked for a screwdriver and nobody provided for them. And so to get the job done, they took a shortcut, and in that process, they cut their hands. So going forward is to keep our eyes on those little things. Ensure that as an organization, we are providing our people and our contractors the right tools to do their jobs safely. We are ensuring that when incidents happen, we investigate with a mindset to learn, not with a mindset to fire. We will continue to assure ourselves. We have an assurance plan on an annual basis where we ensure that all of those areas that we have concern around, we send people in, people that don't know us, to look at the system and say, how robust do you think this system is? And if they come back with a long list of things that they need to do or we need to do to make it more robust, because we're a learning organization, we take it on board and we implement. Finally, we'll continue to challenge ourselves as leaders, right? When we gather together as leaders, it's not just to drink tea and have friendly chats, it's to challenge themselves. And we sometimes have difficult conversations on the table. For me, I am the mirror. I always tell my colleagues, I am the mirror for which you look at. You may think that you're doing something right, but my job is to hold the mirror up to you to say, Guy, we need to address this issue in your site. We need to address this issue in your location. And that is usually very well received. So I think I'd like to wrap it there. We will continue to be learning. We will continue to grow. And most importantly, we will continue to be the leader of innovation, whether in production of oil and gas or in safety and environment.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable, our podcast brought to you by SPDC. Thanks for joining. On this episode, we've discussed Path to Zero, Shell's commitment to safety, and given incredible insights to this very important subject matter. Has been the General Manager, Health and Safety for Shell companies in Nigeria, Elozino Elo. Olaniyo. Ella, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for your time. And remember, safety must be a culture. Shell is doing all it can to ensure that in your personal life also. Make that a crucial watchword. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. I'm Adedayo Olushaki.